Pirate.
He's a bloody pirate, a scallywag.
Everyone's thinking it, I'm just saying it.
Got their own ideas about pirates, but there's more to them scoundrels. And this path meant a harsh life at sea, forever running from the gallows. 'Tis but a warning to all those who wish to know these tales. Pirate. The idea alone is superstition. Just to think it makes grown sailors hold their breath on cold and stormy nights. Buccaneer, freebooter, privateer. 'Twere many a name to describe the men and women who joined the ranks of pirates. But no matter what yous call them, 'twas best to know the type yous dealing with, so's you could live to tell about them. Something to be feared for certain. When the Jolly Roger flag was hoisted, all seafaring ships were aware of the dire consequences at hand. Back in the day, the skull and crossbones flag was a blood-red-colored flag. Sight of it meant if anyone on board an attack ship resisted, they was sure to go to their graves. That be where the name Jolly Roger comes from. It was the French who called it Pretty Red, or Joli Rouge. The black version of the Jolly Roger foretold slightly better news. The ship would be plundered, but lives would be spared. The ruthless reputation of pirates preceded him. Often, just the hoisting of the Jolly Roger scared ship's captains into surrendering instead of risking a deadly battle. A lesson pirates knew well. 'Twas often wiser to be thought of as ruthless than actually getting into a fight. Any sailor to ever see the old Jolly Roger could only hope to be one of the few survivors left to tell the tale. Bartholomew Roberts may have been the most successful pirate ever. He became rich from his plunders of more than 400 ships. He sailed the Caribbean waters, once capturing the governor of Martinique and hanging him from the yardarm. Roberts was killed in the act of pirating in 1722. His loyal crew threw the body overboard so it wouldn't be captured.
Feast your eyes, Captain. All of them faithful hands before the mast. Every man worth his salt.
So this is your able-bodied crew?
Many a man has enjoyed a life at sea, but 'tis the pirate who also enjoys drink, women, and the freedom the life of piracy brings. Merchant seamen and Navy sailors who found themselves out of work would answer the call of any pirate captain who anchored in port and offered men to join up to his crew.
Appearances be hanged! Get me those men!
'Twas dangerous and rigorous work, to be sure, but an equal share of the booty was more than fair than you'd get from a merchant ship, and the workload under the Royal Navy was far worse than the treatment aboard a pirate ship. The good life could be led by a man with no education, no money, and no home on land. New pirate recruits would find a brotherhood and level of freedom they had never experienced. For men willing to put their morals aside for some pillage and plunder, becoming a pirate meant traveling the seven seas to the exotic corners of the world and perhaps digging up a little gold while they're at it. Spotting a pirate on the high seas surely struck terror into the hearts of many. But their clothes and markings served purposes besides fear. A bandana was a pirate's mate because it covered his head from the blazing sun, and if worn proper, also protected his ears from the roar of the cannon blast. Tattoos truly were the marks of a pirate. Tattoos were proof of their travels. A tattoo of a sparrow was a sign that one had traveled 5,000 miles at sea. Pigs and roosters were good tattoos to have. When a ship went down, the crates which held the animals would stay afloat. Superstitious pirates thought that the marks of these animals would afford them the same fate. 'Twas said that a gold earring in the left ear would prevent seasickness and improve eyesight. Kill him. Hang him. And a smart pirate would always wear one gold earring to be used as payment for a proper land burial should he meet an early demise. You'd find all sorts of pirates on the high seas. Tall ones, short ones, ugly ones. Pirates weren't known to separate their crews by race or where you come from. Pirates accepted all those with the desire to live the pirate life, a life of freedom. There were 700 recorded pirates in the Caribbean between 1715 and 1725. They were mostly English, some from the Americas and the West Indies, and a few from Scotland, Wales, Holland, and Sweden. In the year 1721, Old Black Bart's crew was made up of 187 white men and 75 African men. Many of the Africans who served were former slaves from West Indian plantations, slaves that escaped a life of servitude for a life of piracy. Spanish slaves turned pirates were called Cimarrons. The Cimarron accounted for a quarter of the pirates that sailed the waters. You could always count on the Cimarrons during battle, as they would fight like the devil to keep the one thing that was most didn't have been
Let go the anchor!
On a pirate ship, every man knows his place. The captain leads the ship in battle and knows where to get the booty round the many seas. But pirates ain't too keen on authority figures. So the duties was split between the captain and the first mate, also called the quartermaster. This second in command was responsible for rousing the men to work, dividing up the booty, and for doling out punishment. 'Twere not uncommon for Royal Navy men to abandon the military life and join up with the ranks of pirates. But every man aboard were important to the journey, right down to the lowliest deckhand. 'Twas these men, if they be showing themselves able, would be next promoted to quartermaster, hoping someday to captain their own ship on the high seas. A pirate's life weren't all warm Caribbean waters and pieces of eight. No. Life at sea was hard, and for pirates left them with a variety of ailments. The loss of an eye were quite common due to infection, although a wooden replacement weren't typical. An eye patch was far easier. Although pirates did lose body parts in battle, they mostly lost them due to infections and unhealthy living on the ship. On the upside, pirate code stated if a man lost a body part on a voyage, under a decent captain, he was entitled to some pieces of eight, depending on the loss. An eye would fetch 100 pieces of eight, and the loss of a right leg would get about 500. For the left, only about 400.
That's what you call ironic.
Scurvy was another peril of living at sea. Yellow eyes and rotten teeth were a sign of poor nutrition due to lack of fruits. Living on a ship, one might only eat salty meat and hardtack, a biscuit taken on ships. To fight the cursed disease, ships would stop in port and take on fresh citrus like limes. The freedom of the pirating life came with some sacrifices, but for those who could endure them, the rewards would give reason enough. A sword would be the most common weapon to a pirate, but they were known to use almost anything, as long as it served their purpose. 'Twas no one going to just give up their precious belongings, so a pirate needed to be convincing them. 'Twere many things a pirate would use: a cutlass, a dagger, a pistol, or a cannon. But 'twas one thing for sure: on the other end of a pirate's blade 'twould no one want to be. A pirate set sail with an eye on the horizon, the wind in the sails, and his trusty sword by his side. Pirates used many types of blades. Most common was the cutlass, a sturdy sword, perfect for battle, that would cut right to the bone. The blade was shortened enough so as not to get caught in the rigging of a ship while slashing down on some scurvy scoundrel. The rapier blade was used for the fencing style of fighting, and was perfect for running through the gut of an opponent. It even had a guard to prevent the blood from dripping down onto the hand. The dagger was easily concealed in a belt or a boot, and was perfect for the sneaky pirate to use at close range. Then there were the boarding axe, used to cut down the ropes and netting when boarding a ship for a raid. Aboard the ship, more experienced pirates would train the new recruits in the art of sword fighting, and every pirate hoped their sword came from a blacksmith using fine enough steel so as the blade wouldn't break when that sword be needed to save their life. A sword was a pirate's constant companion, but a flintlock pistol were the weapon of choice.
You cheated. Pirate.
Pistols were light, portable, and easy to stash in a belt or a baldric, a broad leather strap worn across the chest. Loading a pistol and keeping the gunpowder dry was the biggest downfall to using such a weapon. A pirate would typically wait until he was ready to fire before loading the shot, so as not to get the powder wet with water or the salty sea air. As a result, it was better to have more pistols to increase the odds. They say Black Bart carried 4 pistols at once, and Blackbeard sometimes wore as many as 6. In the thick of battle, Pirates would use a short-range shotgun called a blunderbuss, filled with nails, glass, and pieces of scrap iron. It'd blast an opponent to smithereens at close range. Flintlock guns took a long time to load, so it was often easier to simply use the butt of the gun as a club to knock out the enemy. Aye, the life of a pirate would be cut short or allowed to last a little longer, depending on which end of the pistol he were on.
Savvy?
First sign of a pirate battle at sea, twere the deafening blast of the cannon. Also called guns by many a seaman, a cannon could send a cannonball as far as 1,000 yards, reaching the enemy before he knew he was even being attacked.
Sir.
Cannon fire!
Stand by to put a shot across our bows, Mr. Mersey.
Aye, sir.
A cannonball across the bow of a ship was usually enough to get a merchant ship or the like to give up their booty without much of a fight. And though pirates often found themselves in a cannon battle, 'tis not as easy as one might think. A full crew was needed to make a worthwhile cannon fight. It took 5 able-bodied pirates to fire a single cannon shot. Each man was assigned a task such as lighting the fuse, adding the gunpowder, and loading the cannonball, called a round shot. There were also the bar shot, where the cannon is loaded with a straight iron bar. A favorite shot for ripping a ship to smithereens was the chain shot. 2 cannonballs connected by a chain was sure to do some damage and send the enemy to the depths. As any good pirate heads for the horizon, he's sure to be smelling the salt in the sea air, feeling the wind in the sails, and hearing the echoes of the cannon's roar. A boat and the ocean could take him to the far reaches of the world, beyond anything a mind could imagine. The heart of a pirate yearned to be at sea, and aboard a pirate ship is where he belonged. A typical pirate ship was a sloop, smaller, faster ships with shallow draft and sails suited to quick escapes. Capable of carrying as many as 75 men and 14 cannons, the sloop was the most common ship found in Caribbean waters in pirating days. A sloop was faster and more agile than the Royal Navy men-of-war, which allowed the pirates to be able to outrun the larger, more well-armed ships. A Spanish galleon could hold up to 200 sailors and could carry massive amounts of booty. That made them frightfully tempting to piratry. Merchant ships also fell under pirate attack, with only 20 or so men aboard, none of which would be trained to use the guns proper. Merchant ships would be easy prey during the 4-week journey from Britain to the New World. The pirate sloop would attack viciously, grab the booty, and perhaps recruit a few new pirates from the ranks of the merchantmen. Then 'twould escape into shallow waters where other ships could not navigate and where no thinking man would dare to tread. Navy.
Clap him in irons, right?
During the golden age of piracy, the British Navy was the most powerful bunch on the oceans. A fearsome fleet, numbering in the hundreds. With ships like the HMS Royal George and the HMS Somerset, nary a pirate ship nor its crew could lay anchor in any waters without a shiver in the timbers. A man-of-war such as the Dauntless, 'twas called a ship of the line. able to blast 100 cannons. To this day, there is only one ship of her kind still in service, the HMS Victory, moored forever in London. With its proper sails for speed. With the British Royal Navy combing the waters, any pirate worth a gold shilling had to watch their back. The myths and traditions of the sea separated all sailors, pirate or not, from the landlubbers who preferred the safety of dry ground. Many tools were used to guide a seaman from one port to another.
I can't buy that compass.
And 'twere rules needed to keep a man honest in close quarters aboard a ship. And even the most loathsome pirate, 'twere a fear to the legends that came from the briny deep. Pirate Code. 'Tis nothing more important to keep pirates in line.
Keep to the code. Aye, the code.
'Tis easy to think pirates a mere lawless group of thieves, but they followed the Pirate Code of Ethics. Before a ship left port, a good captain would establish what they called the ship's articles.
The code.
Pirates Code.
'Twere the agreed-upon rules of that particular ship and voyage. Each man would vote and sign their mark agreeing to the articles before setting sail, swearing their oath over an axe or a Bible. Some ships shared similar rules. For instance, if there was an argument between the crew, it was never settled aboard the ship. Take any differences to land and fight it out on shore. Every pirate had to keep his weapons clean and ready. On Bartholomew Roberts' ship, 'twere no gambling aboard, and no women. Worst of all was to desert the ship in battle. Punishment for breaking the rules of the Pirate Code could mean being
Parlay? That's the one. Parlay.
parley. 'Twere a time-honored pirate tradition that proves there was some honor among thieves. Parley comes from the French word parler, meaning to speak. 'Twas a kind of agreement to hold off on fighting for a time.
Down to the depths, whatever madman thought of parlay.
Pirates at sea on occasion crossed paths with other pirate crews and found themselves fighting over the same riches carried by the merchant ships that be in their waters. Rather than drawing swords, manning the guns and preparing for battle, they called out parley.
Parlay?
As a last resort. 'Twas an agreement to discuss their differences, captain to captain, and agree on terms of a truce rather than bloodshed and cannon fire. Not formally a part of the Pirate Code, it was up to the party given parley to decide whether to grant it or not. If there were one thing on the ship that superstitious pirates feared, it was the compass. They thought that because the magnetized lodestone pointed due north, the tool held magic-like properties. Before the compass, sailors used to use the sun and stars to figure where they was headed. But clouds and storms make short work of that plan, I can say. 'Tis well important to be charting a proper course when sailing the seven seas. With a good backstaff, telescope, map, and a compass, one can chart speed and direction to plot the course. And one must remember to keep a good account of it, so as always to return from whence they came. In battle, the navigator was often the one that was kidnapped, because he could lead another crew to brand new places or get them back to the old ones.
Puts a chill in the bones how many honest sailors have been claimed by this passage.
Likely they'd be having some charts too, which were extremely valuable, as no one had fully mapped out the seas beyond their own locale. And getting to sail new waters is what pirating is all about.
Now, bring me that horizon.
Singing songs weren't just for little girls or dandy lads. It were an important part of life aboard a pirate ship. Those that could play music were required to be available 24 hours a day, lest they be needed.
Drink up, me hearties, yo-ho.
The French word for singing be chanter, and that's where the pirate's sea shanty comes from. Pirates sang for entertainment, but also used shanties while doing their many chores aboard the ship. The rhythm of the songs helped the men from getting bored and kept them working together. The pirates sang in a call and response, with the lead shantymen singing out and a crew of pirates chanting back the response. When they weren't working, pirates would sing songs that told tales of famous men, great battles, or about the lost love of womenfolk left on dry land. The songs of the ocean, the crashing of the waves, and the whistle of the wind was a constant companion for anyone who chose a life at sea.
Yo-ho, a pirate's life for me.
Bad luck to be singing about pirates with us mired in this unnatural fog. Mark my words.
Consider them marked.
Here are some things that no sailor would do on any pirate ship, as the superstitions of the sea run deep. First, never start a voyage on a Friday. 'Twas the day of the week Christ was crucified on. Never start a voyage on the first Monday in April, as on this date in the Bible, Cain slew Abel. And disaster is sure to follow if a ship is boarded with the left foot first. Don't be caught whistling aboard the ship, as that's sure to bring stormy seas and high winds to be hindering a ship's safe passage. And don't be bringing any flowers on board, as someone will be making a funeral wreath before long.
You'll be dining with the crew, and you'll be naked.
A naked woman on board will calm the sea, which is why there be a half-naked figurehead on the front of most ships. One might just find themselves crewing on the Flying Dutchman all too soon. 'Tis true that most pirates would prefer for treasure to be shiny and gold. But for men living at sea were sometimes other things more valuable than pieces of eight. 'Twas often easier to steal something rather than exchange coins for it. But though shoes and coats be often what they needed, the glimmer of gold doubloons did make a pirate's eyes shine. Burying treasure 'twas not common with pirates. Life is too short to be burying loot in the sand. Only a few pirates buried their booty. Captain Kidd left his in the New World on a stretch called Long Island. Pirate treasure 'tweren't all gold and silver neither, though surely those be the ways to get rich quick. Pirates would take clothes, rum, sugar, tobacco, and anything else they could sell or use themselves aboard the ship. One thing that ain't a lie is the ruthless way a pirate might go about getting his treasure. If a lady refused to part with her fancy jeweled rings, a pirate might be known to cut off her finger in order to get them. According to the pirate code, all the treasure was to be divided up according to the articles of agreement on the ship. Then, when the ship took to port, the crew would spend their ill-gotten gain on women and liquor, often spending in one night what it took months of plunder to get. Then, 'twas back to sea and back to their terrifying looting, stealing, pirating ways.
Hold up there, you! It's a shilling to tie up your boat at the dock.
Before doing business with the pirating kind, one must know the kinds of money to be spending. A typical Spanish silver coin had a worth of 8 reales. That's what was called a piece of 8. Spanish gold be worth 16 times that. 'Twas the currency used clear round the world by the late 18th century. A bottle of rum, 'twas worth about 1 shilling, or 2 shillings for a bottle of cheap wine. And what with how pirates like to be drinking, a seaman's salary wouldn't last for long. And 'tweren't just the drink to be worried about. A belt could cost as much as 4 shillings, a cutlass 7, and a flintlock pistol as much as 5 pounds. 100 shillings that was. Made by hand these coins were, and they had different shapes because of it. None of them perfect round. A piece of 8 you could cut into pieces as you needed. Even though you broke the silver into pieces, it still stays just as valuable. Cutting the silver into bits is where you get the phrase, 2 bits. A pirate was always on the lookout for some pieces of 8. He wouldn't mind stealing to get them.
He spent 3 days lying on a beach drinking rum.
Welcome to the Caribbean, life.
Rum was a favored drink for many a pirate and seaman alike. Rum is made from molasses and was first discovered by Spanish explorers on the island of Barbados. On the ship, rum was held in barrels or in onion bottles, so called for their shape, which, while looking like an onion, made it so the bottle would not tip over in the movements of a ship at sea. For a man who joined the likes of pirates, rum could become more important than the riches he might gain, a currency of the highest value. And where beer and wine would sour on long voyages, rum could keep much longer, so long as no man would drink the barrels dry. True tales there are of many a pirate ship being taken easily as the crew was too drunk to fight. A pirate's most favored time for rum was after a pillage or plunder. The crew would celebrate an attack by harboring in a lagoon, drinking many a bottle of rum and firing off the cannons for days on end.
Mr. Cotton's parrot, do you have the courage and fortitude to follow orders and stay true in the face of danger and almost certain death?
Walking through town, one might have seen some pirates parading about with a parrot on their shoulder. But they likely weren't their pets. This is how they would advertise that the bird was for sale. 'Twas the personality of the parrot that made the darn thing so popular in the marketplace. Not to mention their brightly colored feathers and their ability to be handled and trained. A parrot can also mimic sounds, whistle songs, and even repeat the language of people. But it was only the rich that were able to afford these exotic animals. 'Twas a trend all over Europe for royalty to keep a menagerie of exotic animals. And for the smart pirate, trading of parrots became a very good business indeed.
Thank you, Jack. You're welcome. Not you. We named the monkey Jack.
Man's best friend for a pirate tweren't a hound dog like today. But despite Captain Barbossa keeping company with little Jack here, it tweren't a monkey neither.
Means no.
When ships first began to sail to Africa, monkeys were often captured and taken aboard as entertainment for the crew. Smaller items on the ship started being known as monkey-sized. Things like small containers of rum and even the smallest cabin. Even though you'd never find a pirate caught dead in one, the Royal Navy midshipmen wore monkey jackets, so-called because of their short size that allowed the men to climb the rigging looking a bit like a monkey while they're at it. Having a monkey on board wasn't that much fun for long. As they grew up, the monkeys started getting mischievous and causing trouble aboard, and them pirates was unruly enough. When pirates made port, monkeys were displayed for sale. Many of the monkeys seen in today's zoos in the British Isles are direct descendants of monkeys sold by pirates. Plundering and pillaging 'twas a great delight for many a buccaneer, so long as they didn't get caught, of course. If captured, one could be sure retribution was soon to follow. And 'tweren't many a light sentence for the pirating type, to be sure. But them government types weren't the only ones handing down punishment, and sometimes swift justice at the hands of the law would be better than the fury of an angry pirate captain and crew.
Off you go.
One of the more famous pirate punishments is surely walking the plank. But alas, 'tis largely a myth. 'Twas much easier to give the victim the old heave-ho, where he'd be stitched into a sailcloth, weighed down, and tossed overboard, straight to Davy Jones's locker. To be sure, there were other methods of punishment popular with pirates. The lash of the cat-o'-nine-tails would provide a punishment for all the crew to witness as caution. And keel-hauling worked well, where a crewman was tied to a rope and towed under the ship to be thrashed about in the icy waters, often sliced to pieces by the barnacles under the ship. A captain was likely to maroon a sailor on a sandbar should he break the code. He'd be given one pistol and one bullet to off himself rather than wither away. If a crime be not so bad,
Lock him in the brig.
the pirate would find himself in the ship's brig for a time. But walking the plank would prove to be more trouble than it's worth, as 'twas easier to use the cold steel of a cutlass to dole out swift justice the pirate way.
Agreed.
The brig be a fancy word for a jail cell, but whatever the name, 'tis no place a pirate wanted to be found. The first jail cells was small enough for only one man at a time, and 'tweren't till later, when so many scoundrels was being imprisoned, that they grew larger. The British started keeping pirates aboard floating jails made from old ships anchored in the harbor. These cells were notoriously leaky and wet, and like all jails, landlocked or not, vermin like mice, rats, and lice was everywhere. To make matters worse, all prisoners were thrown in the same cell, regardless of crime, race, or gender. So the spread of disease like typhoid, consumption, and TB were common. A pirate's best bet was to inform on his fellow pirates or hope a judge could be bribed with pieces of eight. Thankfully, prisoners didn't stay in jail for long. Typically no more than a month or so while they waited for trial or the hangman's noose. But the prisoner was not always released to freedom. To make room for more prisoners, some were sold off into slavery to the likes of merchant companies like the British East India Trading Company. They would serve 7 to 11 years of servitude, at least for them few that lived that long.
I intend to see to it that any man who sails under a pirate flag or wears a pirate brand gets what he deserves. A short drop and a sudden stop.
Sometimes 'twas called the Devil's Jig or the Gallows Dance. Either way, 'twas the fate of many pirates to find punishment for their pirating ways at the hangman's noose. In the 10 years between 1716 and 1726, over 400 pirates were hanged. Officials and clergy would use the opportunity to lecture folks about the evils of piracy and used the unfortunate pirate as an example for their cause.
Jack Sparrow, may God have mercy on your soul.
Once the pirate was sentenced to a hanging, there was usually a matter of days before he met his doom. So folks would come from all around to bear witness, for a hanging was the biggest and most attended public event there was. And before the man was hanged, he was usually given the opportunity to say a few last words.
Can't wait forever.
Then, and to make sure other pirates knew what fate would befall their evil ways, the bodies was preserved in tar and hung in plain sight for days for all to see. Tis true that most of the time a pirate lived his life at sea. But time on land was needed to calm his sea legs and fill his appetite for the entertainment lacking on a ship. One can imagine that 'twere many a place where pirates weren't welcome. But in the few places that would see their kind, one could almost catch a glimpse of the devil dancing beside them scoundrels. Port Royal was surely a stop for many a buccaneer sailing through the warm Caribbean waters, but was also a place to beware, as it became a haven for some of the most vile pirates in the world. It was in 1655 that the Brits claimed Port Royal in Jamaica as their own. Them Brits then invited the local buccaneers to attack the Spanish ships that passed, on behalf of the King of England, of course. And attack they did all right, setting up the island for a full population of pirates.
Bloody pirates!
Port Royal was in the heart of the West Indies, and 'twas a good place to sell plunder with its massive marketplace. And the 30-foot waters just offshore made it a perfect place to drop anchor. Over 500 ships could fit in the harbor at once. It was all cutthroats, grog shops, brothels, and gaming houses. Some of the evilest and worstest sinners in the world came to Port Royal, giving it the nickname the Sodom of the New World. But it was one tragic event after another that doomed this hive of villainous pirates. In 1692, a massive earthquake shook the town to pieces. And they say a tidal wave, big as anyone had ever seen, crushed the town and left 2,000 dead in its wake. Many believe that it was divine punishment for the sinners who partook in the evils of Port Royal, and that's what led it to its watery grave.
Can you sail under the command of a pirate?
Tortuga?
Tortuga.
Nary a pirate worth his weight in gold who didn't know of Tortuga, a real pirate island.
Savvy.
Tortuga got its name from its shape, just like that of a sea turtle.
Aye, sea turtles.
When the Spanish sacked the nearby island Hispaniola, the French hunters and settlers pointed their deadlights to Tortuga, where they were allowed safe haven so long as they defended the French settlement. However, employment was scarce for the scallywags, so they often turned to piracy, sinking Spanish ships to the briny deep, hoarding the swag aboard. The French governor of Tortuga cut lines with France and made his own laws, which turned a kind eye towards pirates. The governor also imported 1,700 wenches in hopes of controlling these scurvy sea dogs. Such an isle was a welcome port to mateys with able sea legs and a taste for rum. A Royal Navy officer loyal to the crown was never idle. good was there to be in a pirate if there'd be none to be pirating, eh? Governor Swan, though surely an enemy to pirates, partnered up with them where it suited his needs.
That needs a bold and adventurous man. Bring in this Captain Kidd while we take the measure of him.
'Twas a common tactic of the royal and colonial governments, since 'twas true that pirates sailed the waters around the New World as well as the Caribbean. To be sure, old Blackbeard was granted a pardon by North Carolina Governor Eden because his pirating brought commerce to a poor area with no cash crops. 'Twas also a mighty fine way to weaken the enemy's fleet and protect one's own from the dangers of piracy on the open sea. Governors typically enjoyed a piece of the pirate booty in order to look the other way. English colonies were more than likely to strike deals with pirates than England herself because of the high trade taxes that the crown demanded. 'Twas the pirate trade that helped boost the American economy, struck a blow to the British, and helped level the playing ground for the American Revolution.
Search every cabin, every hole, down to the bilges.
Them high-ranking officers would boast about the strength and their ranks. But this old coat here says tain't nothing but scoundrels in the Royal Navy. Many a men were forced to the service since the English Isles needed protecting from France and Spain. And most of them served in the clothes they came with, not the pretty threads of the higher ranks. And though it seemed like a pirate captain were a man to be feared,
Agreed.
a Royal Navy captain be much more cruel. These could kill a man under their command without answering to no one.
Pop him over.
And worked most of them to death anyhow. Sprogs in the Royal Navy hardly knew how to fight. The weapons were locked up to keep the men from a proper mutiny, and tain't many of them knew how to swim neither. Any deserter feared death at the noose, so pirating seemed a good idea.
If I must hang, I'll hang. But I'll go to the gallows with clean guts at least.
And when the wars were over, the Navy left the men with no pay and no roof over their heads. All they knew were the sea, so many of them turned to the sweet trade.
Take what you can. Give nothing back.
Hello, chum.
For a young lass in the 1700s, pirate was a fearful word, but only second to another: corset.
You like pain? Try wearing a corset.
Corsets first came about in the 1600s. They were used to cinch a woman's waist to give her an hourglass shape that was considered desirable, while at the same time helping to accentuate her other assets. Fabric stitched over whalebone was laced up tight, often requiring the help of one or more dressers. These being undergarments, the corset was worn beneath a fancy dress and would not have been seen by menfolk.
I'm told it's the latest fashion in London.
Well, women in London must have learnt not to breathe.
In order to achieve a fashionable look, lasses would tie themselves so tight into a corset that it would often make it hard to breathe.
I can't breathe.
We call these gals tight lacers. But these lasses best be careful. If the corset not be fit right, it can bruise ribs, chafe skin, or pinch the nerves. 'Twas said even men wore corsets during the 1800s, but 'tweren't likely common for them to be pirates, lest they be seen as a bit peculiar. a sword and wear a wig. Many a story of pirates runs through the oceans of the world. From the Caribbean to the Mediterranean, round to the Asian seas. Men and women with dire dealings enough to make them legends, and others whose tales will forever be lost to the blue depths. To this day, pirate lore mixes fact with fiction, turning pirates into gods or scoundrels of the sea. These tales will go on so long as there's water to fill the oceans and sailors left to cross them.